Hello, everybody. This is John Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today we're going to talk about the Ministry of Brewing. I am wearing my beer brewing hat from Baltimore, Gunther Brewing, if you can see that. And so that means we're going to talk about beer. And specifically, we're going to talk about the Ministry of Brewing here in East Baltimore on the corner of Wolf Street and Lombard Street, just south of the Hopkins Medical Complex, if you know where that is. And we will get to the beer part of it shortly, but we're also going to talk about the work that was done to restore this former church and why it won one of Baltimore Heritage's 2020 Historic Preservation Awards. But we'll get there in a minute. Let's start with the church itself. This is the church behind me is St. Michael the Archangel Roman Catholic Church, and it was built in 1857, so just before the Civil War. And it was really built for German immigrants, German Catholic immigrants who were at that time coming into the country starting in pretty big numbers. German immigrants were some of Baltimore's earliest immigrant populations even in the early 1800s. Zion Lutheran Church downtown, another German church built in 1808. So well before the waves and waves of immigrants from all across Europe in the 1880s and 1890s, we had in Baltimore Germans coming in pretty sound numbers. And let me read you a few of the numbers just for a little bit of context. In 1840, Baltimore had a population of 100,000 people. In 1850, we had a population of 170,000. And by 1860, we had a population of 210,000. So between 1840 and 1860, we more than doubled in population. We were more than 50% of the state's population, and a good number of those were Germans. One thing that I learned that surprised me was even though we were Maryland was founded by the Calvert family that had converted to Catholicism, the population of Catholics in Maryland around that time was about 5%. I thought it probably would have been higher, but it was around 5%. In Baltimore, though, we had 15,000 Catholics. About 15% of Baltimore's population was Catholic, so a pretty good number. And by the 1850s, we needed more churches, like the church behind me. St. Michael's was part of a complex that included the church itself, a girls' school, a boys' school, a rectory, a parish hall, a convent, and a house for the brothers to stay in. So really an extraordinarily large complex here. And it was built by the Redemptorists. The Redemptorists are a Catholic order, and their founder was a gentleman named St. Augustus Liguori. Liguori founds the Redemptorists, and he's a pretty remarkable individual. He was born in Italy, and his father wanted him to go into the military. But he turned out to be quite small and quite skinny, and definitely not up for pulling longbow archery or wielding an Italian broadsword. So he went into the law instead. He got his law degree and practiced law and did quite well at first. Of his first 7 big cases, he won all 7. But then he starts to doubt the practice of law. And if you are a practicing lawyer, I'm going to read this quote. If you are a lawyer, we'll let you reflect silently on this letter that he writes to a friend of his who's another lawyer. In the 1720s, he writes, "My friend, our profession is too full of difficulties and dangers. We lead an unhappy life and run risking dying an unhappy death." So by the 1720s, Liguori is apparently not so satisfied with the law. And then on his 8th big case, he loses. Maybe that was the straw that broke his camel's back. And he decides to abandon the law and go into the priesthood. And that he does. Goes on to be a prolific writer. His treatise, Moral Theology, goes through he writes 9 editions of it. He goes on to found the Redemptorist order, and he becomes a saint. So I think what the Italian law profession in the 1700s lost, the world's Catholic community certainly gained in Alphonsus Liguori. So the Redemptorist order spreads from Italy to Austria and Germany, and we get our Redemptorists here in Baltimore through a German branch that comes into New York and then goes to upstate Michigan, of all places, then works its way down to Pittsburgh and then over here to Baltimore. The Redemptorists decide by the 1840s that Maryland was going to be kind of the North American hub. They found a place out in Hagerstown, I believe, where priests would train. And then in Baltimore, they found a place where novices could do a year of training before they decide to take their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. That's what the Redemptorists believe. So by the 1850s, we had two other Redemptorist churches, St. Alphonsus, that makes sense, and St. James in Baltimore, but we grew with this third one, St. Michael's. And it was a fantastically large church and complex. In its heyday, it had 2,600 families and 1,600 kids in the girls and boys schools, making it one of the largest Redemptorist parishes in the country. But even by the 1920s, it had started to drop down to a population of 600 families. And by 2011, it finally had to close. There were no more services being held here. And unfortunately, the building sat vacant for a number of years. But fortunately for us, in 2016 and 17, a group of folks led by local real estate developer Ernst Valerie, thank you, Ernst, got together and decided they were going to try to do something with this church building. When you say to people that there is a church being converted into a brewery, it evinces all sorts of emotions depending on your outlook on life. But I think no matter what you think about it, we can all agree it is a wild idea. But it is not a new idea. There are churches converted into breweries. Now let me read you a few of them. There is one in Louisville, Kentucky, one in Grand Rapids, Michigan, one in Indianapolis, Indiana. Cincinnati has two, not one, but two. And closer to home, there's one in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, church converted into brewery. And then perhaps my favorite, the one that I first went to, is a place called Church Works in Pittsburgh that was converted from a church to a brewery in 1996, so pretty early. As one pastor turned brewmaster said, and I'll quote, "There's nothing in the Bible that says you can't drink alcohol in a responsible manner." So there you go here. The folks here converting the church into a brewery did a wonderful job, and we're going to switch over to our awards here. By the time they got it, the church had been deconsecrated. It was no longer a church. The religious iconography, like the altar and stained glass, had been removed. But whatever was remaining, they kept, and they salvaged, and they maintained, and they repaired, including the original plaster, including the marble, wonderful marble tiles on the floor and the arched vaulted ceilings. All of that they retained. What few church pews remained, they converted into banquet type seating in the new brewery and pub. And the joists that they had to replace, they kept the old wood and turned them into the tables that you can see if you go in there to have a drink. And even the original lighting, all 400 light bulbs that illuminate the wonderful ribbed ceiling in the main sanctuary, those have all been restored and are working order. So really fantastic work. And I want to say thank you to the people involved. And I'm going to read this short list. If you know any of the folks, please reach out and tell them congratulations as well. The project team included the Ministry of Brewing, St. Michael's Redevelopment Partners, Present Company Architects, Wiss Janney Elsner Associates, Thermal Tech Engineering, FM Harvey Construction Company, and Fleet Electric. So I will encourage you, whether you drink beer or just want to have a glass of water, come on down, come in this space. It is really, really magnificent. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.